Thank you, Stefan. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me here. I must say, I feel humbled among the giants here, as I am definitely not an expert, and I'm definitely a climate activist and more of a generalist. That was what we were talking about. But anyway, so what I propose is let's cool the planet with nature fast. And let's calm the weather extremes, because we've also found out that that is what we can do. Just a little bit more about me is here you see two pictures of the valley that I bought in 2010 and later on started to reforest. And after 6 years, we saw, first of all, a lot of new forest cover. But secondly, what is more important, first of all, I found that restoring local climate is actually quite simple. In terms of hydrology, it is basically swales, small dams, and digging holes that does the trick. Otherwise, it is giving nature a chance and make sure you don't use any pesticides or anything. Nature drops, the temperatures drop very fast. And with the last big drought in the area, everything was so dry, there was no water anywhere, and local towns had to be water had to be brought in. But this valley was the only one that still had water, and springs were still working, and that was just after a few years. The soils became spongy after a couple of years, and the number of birds and beneficial insects increased enormously. And last, that was maybe one of the best things. We had a visitor of jaguar and puma for the first time in living memory. So what has that got to do with the health of our planet? Well, we've learned a lot during this conference, but we also know that we are in big trouble. And right now, what has happened so far is that 50 years of conferences and major agreements have basically not dented the situation where we are in. CO2 is still rising. Actually, this year is going to be a record year. And we have been focusing on greenhouse gases all along. And this will lead, in my opinion, to climate catastrophe if we don't open up the focus to the subjects we are talking about here in this conference. So you probably all are familiar with this article, which came out in November 2019, which is about the climate tipping points that are on the move in the global climate system. And you see that climate tipping points basically show us that we are in a non-linear change, and at some point things can go wrong very rapidly. The one that I'm personally focusing on is the Amazon rainforest, which, as you know, is at the brink of dying back, and that will be an accelerated process of drying out, dying back, and could basically level that enormous forest within decades, at least large parts of it. So the Earth is a complex living system. It's a self-regulating body, and that's also the easiest way to understand how we should deal with it. I compare the damage right now with stage 3 cancer. We find we have some symptoms. We find it uncomfortable. In some areas, it's worse, but we're not yet at the stage where it's irreversible, probably, and we haven't seen the full-blown impact yet. But there's a high chance of cascading collapse of ecosystems soon. The Amazon rainforest is the first in line. So what this conference does especially is invites two of the elephants into the climate room. The first one is that global warming is mainly caused by land use change, which is disrupting living soils, vegetation, and the water cycle. And secondly, it is that land use change is basically resulting in increasing droughts, heat waves, floods, food and water crises, etc. So the focus that we have in the IPCC and in the COPs and the general climate narrative is basically not the one that will get us out of trouble if we don't add this to the story and front load these solutions. Because the good news is we have the solutions. We have just heard some of the amazing ones. Fiji's one is a very inspiring example. And I think that if we can actually activate sufficient people, organizations, companies, and finance, we can solve this climate crisis. But we need to do it now and at scale, because at some point, revitalizing the biosphere will be basically a window that closes. We can heal soils, vegetation, forests, and hydrate land, restore water cycles, and also ocean life, which is not part of this conference, but very important. And if we do that, we will see amazing results within years. Healthy landscapes basically produce clouds and precipitation and cool the planet and calm the weather. So, but how? How do we do it at the scale that is necessary to get us out of trouble? The first obvious one is we need to have a global moratorium on logging of existing natural forests everywhere now. No more delay. 2030 is ridiculous. The second one is to have a global Marshall Plan to regenerate 1 billion hectares of degraded land with climate-smart landscaping, healing the soils, vegetation, and water cycle. We need to think globally and act locally, as was already said by various people, and regeneration needs to happen everywhere, but our primary focus needs to be on doing that in the tropics. And I'll explain to you why. We have to redesign and localize food production aligned with nature, as again, Vijay just showed. There are marvelous examples around. And we also need to include the biotic pump in the plans to connect the small and the water and the large water cycle in order to understand how we can improve the situation over large stretches of land. So why focus on the tropics? Well, it is what you call the best bang for your buck. We all know that solar energy coming into the tropics is a multiple of what is in the northern regions, and both the degradation and the restoration, the regeneration goes fastest there. What you see here is a picture of where bioactivity is largest throughout the year, and you see that basically the tropical zones are the large players year-round, even during the northern hemisphere summer. They're still a very large part of what is happening. We can also see that most of the cooling of water vapor in the air is exactly in the tropical regions. Actually, the impacts in the tropical regions, both in negative and in positive side, are strongest. So that's where we need to focus, and that's where also a lot of the support needs to go in terms of finance. And this is a very recent article which showed basically that forests here in the blue zone, which is basically the equatorial zone, are already right now cooling the planet by 1 degree centigrade, which means that if we hack them away, we will see an incredible acceleration of the heating of the planet. And at the same time, 1 and 1 is 2, and 1 minus 1 is 0. If you would somehow miraculously could double the amount of forest in the blue zone, we basically would not warm up anymore. So, but what do we need to do to calm the weather and cool the earth? Because that's quite a large undertaking. I think we need to call and organize a global regenerative movement. Repairing soils, vegetation, and the water cycle needs to become sort of the victory cry of millions and millions of that is what we're going to do, because it also empowers everybody. Support 500 million smallholder farmers in the global south to do the regeneration. The Fiji's one is definitely a possibility. I think in many cases, finance will play a role in doing so. organize a global coalition of civil society companies and governments to get this regeneration at the scale that is necessary. Make regeneration visible with high-profile eco-restoration centers, stores, stories, and jobs. And invest sufficiently into this regeneration. My estimate is that it's around 2% of global GDP for the next 20 years, but it will give you a large return on investment, not in the last place, a livable planet. And I think what we also need to do is we need to spread the news. We can cool the planet fast. We can calm the weather. We have the solutions. So let's turn this around. So who do we have to talk to? First of all, the scientific community, we've already talked about it. They need to drop their carbon tunnel vision and start seeing that water and the living planet is actually a very important player if we want to balance the climate and the weather on our planet. The financial elite needs to understand that right now their assets will be lost if we don't act on time and at scale, and investing in regeneration will be fast, safe, and profitable, and will protect their assets. Then the farmers, we in the global south, they are the heroes of the story, and we have to support them and ask them to regenerate their lands and turn into sustainable food production, and with that calm the weather and cool the planet. And the climate youth, I think I said stop protesting is maybe a bit too much, but they need to actually activate themselves into leading the regeneration movement. They shouldn't wait and kick the politicians. It's not going to happen. The politicians need to tell the story that we can actually get ourselves out of the mess we're in, and we can do it fast. And that will also give them finally the necessary votes that they need to stay in power, because that's what they want. Governments and institutions need to listen and support regeneration without bureaucracy, red tape, and delay. Far too slow. And the world, let's act. We can create a beautiful future for all our children now, and it will be very exciting, in fact. But we are running out of time. We need to act at the scale and the speed necessary because the challenge is enormous. So what will we get in return? If we front load regeneration as a top priority together with the already ongoing energy transition, localization of economies, and transitioning to circular production, we get diminishing weather extremes locally within years, a global temperature that could go down by 2040 for the first time, and substantially reduce poverty and vitalize rural communities, especially in the global south. Have water and food security for the world at large, regeneration of biodiversity, and most SDGs significantly improved. Now we will need, apart from finance, a tool set, and what I propose is a digital Gaia, and many elements of this digital Gaia exist already. It's basically a virtual world that we all know via the internet, where we can exchange information, communication, coordination, and finance. I call them here the Facebook of regenerators. That's so that all the regenerators are able to sit in an ecosystem where they can communicate. A database of solutions like Nexus of regeneration. A Google Earth of projects, so that you can zoom into all the projects that are out there. The Arara tool, that is an Uber and Starbucks of regeneration, because we need to have in every town, we have to have a poster, a clearly posted child of regeneration. Digital regenerative currencies that can help to circulate in local economies like watersheds to especially help the regeneration and the bioeconomy. And transparent data online, so we don't have to write these incredibly long reports to all the instances that always want to keep us off the job to actually regenerate. So this is then the Facebook of regenerators. I'll just go through it very quickly, but I guess the idea is simple. The Google Earth-like map of projects, which you can also see that you can zoom into and then see details of what is happening on millions of places. And myself, I'm working on the ARARA tools supporting the transition to regenerative land use. Because of the lack of time, I cannot really explain the process, but basically a large part of the workflow that you have to do to transition from destructive land use, like, for instance, pastures, etc., all the way into forms of biodiverse, integrated food production. A lot of it can actually be done in a semi-automated way, and also can include possibilities to get microfinance to help the process. So this is an ambitious timeline we are up against, because we are running out of time. And so the first thing I would say, let's come together to have this regenerative movement integrated with all the wonderful things that are already happening around the world. Secondly, at COP27 and beyond, we have to show that they are partly barking up the wrong tree, and they have to start listening to this story. Build the digital Gaia, which is not that difficult because most parts already exist. It's an integration of a lot of instruments that are already out there. And then onboard millions of projects worldwide, and basically make it into a sort of fun and exciting challenge to regenerate our world. And in my case, kick off the large project in the Amazon to avert the tipping point of the dieback, because that will not have a regional impact. That will have an immense global impact on the world's climate system. So if you're interested, say hello to me. And I want special thanks to Walter Jena and Stefan Swatzer, the Eco Restoration Alliance, and my friends at Green Water Pools. Marcel is here. Thank you very much.